Hello class, this is a review video for Unit 4.2, which is the only section of the exams that I don't already have a review video for, because the other sections I did a video for when we covered that section. So, let's talk about Unit 4.2. So, first of all, what is the remnant? The remnant is a term that used to refer to the group of Israelites that remain faithful, especially through the period of the Babylonian captivity when they're living in a foreign land and they're surrounded by this more dominant culture of the Babylonians, and they're worshiping other gods and all that sort of thing. So the remnant is the group of Israelites that stay faithful to the law and keep the kosher laws and keep the Sabbath laws and don't worship other gods and stay Jewish even though they're not living in a Jewish land. The pattern in the book of Judges is, by the way, all these PowerPoints are available online as they always are if you go under notes and assignments on Edline. So Joshua and Judges, the pattern is that here. The Israelites sin through the sin of idolatry. They worship other gods. God punishes them by having them fall into the hands of another nation that conquers them. They cry out to God for help. God fixes it by raising up a judge. They ask the judge to be king, and he refuses. And there's a period of peace, and then they sin again. The best example of this probably is Gideon, but it happens over and over again. Why does God not grant the Israelites a king in the book of Judges? Because God is supposed to be their king. Yeah, so that's why. In what ways was Solomon a good king? Hold on a second. I'm going to turn up the mic volume here. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Can you hear me now? Not that you're going to be able to talk to me, but I think that'll be a little bit better. In what ways was Solomon considered a good king? He was really wise. One, if you remember the story about the two women who were fighting over the baby and whose baby it is, he has a really wise way of figuring that out. And also he built the temple, which was a big deal. Why was Solomon ultimately considered a bad king? Because he had like 700 wives and they led him to worship other gods and put other gods' altars in the temple. It was bad. After the split of the nation of Israel, the north is called Israel still, and the south is called Judah. What was the great sin of every king except for David and Josiah? Idolatry. What is a prophet and what is their role? I suggest looking at the prophet's handout. This will be, or PowerPoint. This will be very useful for you. The role of the prophet is they are God's mouthpiece to the people. That's what they do. They speak God's word to the people. That's their role. What was the relationship of the prophets to the kings? They start out as advisors to the kings, and that's like what Samuel is to Saul, and also what Nathan is to David. But at other points, they're going to clash with the king, like Elijah clashes with Ahab, and that sort of thing, because they're going to say things that the king doesn't like. Identify the following prophets. So Samuel is the last of the judges, and the prophet that also appoints the first king Saul. Nathan is the prophet for David, and he's the one that calls David out about the whole affair with Bathsheba. Did I skip the David questions? Yeah, skip this one. Why does David consider the best king in Israelites history? Because he's the one that stays faithful to God, even though he does some messed up things like the affair with Bathsheba, and he kills off Bathsheba's husband Uriah. He always comes back to God. And that's what made me think of that, because Nathan calls him out for that and makes him realize that he's been doing the wrong thing. So, but Nathan always comes back to God. I'm sorry, David always comes back to God, with Nathan's help sometimes. Elijah is the prophet known for his miracles. He does tons of miracles, and he's kind of the typical prophet that all other prophets kind of take their lead from. He really clashes with the king Ahab. He also gets taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot, which is kind of the first time we ever hear about anyone going to heaven, which is a development in their belief, which is pretty cool. Elisha is his successor and takes over in his prophetic mission after he goes up to heaven, and does a lot of miracles as well. Isaiah is a prophet. Might have been more than one person using the same name, like they might have kind of like Elijah and Elisha. There might have been more than one Isaiah. But it was his book is before, during, and after the exile, and he gives the people a lot of hope while they're going through that hard time with the Babylonians, and also he has tons of prophecies about the Messiah, more than any other prophet. Jeremiah is a young prophet living in Jerusalem during the time that they're under siege by the Babylonians before they get captured and taken into exile. He's a young prophet. He does some sign acts. And one of the biggest things that he does is he talks about a new covenant and a new law that will be written on the hearts of the people, and that, of course, is fulfilled by Jesus. Ezekiel is a prophet around the same time as Jeremiah, although he's a little bit older. And he's also lives through the siege of Jerusalem, and he does tons of sign acts, and his two most famous things that he does is he has tons of shepherd parables, which Jesus will quote quite a bit, and also he has this vision of the dry bones in the desert that come back together, and then God puts flesh on them, and then God breathes life back into them, and that's supposed to, one, represent the exiles returning from Babylon but going back to Jerusalem, but also it is one of the first places that life after death is prophesied. So again, that's a development in their belief. Daniel is a young prophet in exile. He actually ends up coming to become an advisor of the Babylonian king, and because he can interpret dreams and that sort of thing. And he faithfully lives as a Jew. He's part of that remnant in the foreign land. And one of the most important things that he does is he has a vision of 4 beasts, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the Son of Man comes and replaces the 4 beasts. What is a sign act? A sign act is a symbolic action. It's not a miracle. It's not anything. It's not anything God does. It's something that the prophet does to symbolize something. I suggest looking at the Jeremiah homework and the Ezekiel homework because they did lots of sign acts, especially Ezekiel. Remember, Ezekiel cooks over poop to symbolize the people's defilement in their idolatry. And then Jeremiah wears the yoke, the ox yoke, to represent that they're about to be captured by the Babylonians and be put into slavery. Elijah does the thing where he cuts off his hair and he burns some of it and chases some, and that represents what's supposed to happen to Jerusalem. There's tons of them. What are the prophecies surrounding the following figures, and how does Jesus relate to these? So, Daniel, in the Son of Man, this is the vision of the 4 beasts. He has this vision of 4 beasts that each represent a different empire that's going to take over for the one before. But after them, one who is like a son of man, like a human figure, comes in and replaces all 4 of the beasts and has dominion forever, and he's comes riding in on the clouds, and he's going to judge the nations. And Jesus quotes this and calls himself the Son of Man. Jesus calls himself the Son of Man more than he calls himself anything else, more than he says, I'm the Son of God, I'm the Messiah, I'm the Son of David. He calls himself the Son of Man. And when he is, and he talks about how the Son of Man is going to judge, how he's going to judge the nations, just like in Daniel. And when he's on trial, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in all 3 of those Gospels, when he's on trial and they're asking him, hey, who are you? Are you the Blessed One, the Son of God? He says, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds and, coming to judge the nations. And basically that's him saying, yeah, that's me. I'm that dude. In Isaiah, he has tons of prophecies about the Anointed One, that he's going to be a suffering servant, that he's going to die for the sins of his people and suffer for the sins of his people, that he's going to be humble, he's not going to be this like big flashy king, that he's going to come to proclaim liberty to captives and heal the blind and the deaf and all those sorts of things. And Jesus really, really takes a lot from Isaiah. He really is that sort of Messiah. In fact, the first thing he says in public, right when he starts his ministry, is he goes into the synagogue and he reads one of the Messiah passages from Isaiah, and he tells the people that he is fulfilling that prophecy right now and reading it to them. He says, in you hearing this today, this prophecy is fulfilled. And again, the word anointed and Messiah and Christ, those are all the same word, just in different languages. Anointed is English, Messiah is Hebrew, Christ is Greek. They all mean the same thing. In Ezekiel, he has these parables about the good shepherd, how God is the good shepherd and he's going to take care of his flock, and the people are the lost sheep, and there's all these other nations who are the wolves, and God's going to protect them because he's the good shepherd. And he's going to judge the good sheep from the bad sheep. Anyway, Jesus is going to say the same thing, but instead of God being the good shepherd, he's going to be the good shepherd. So he's going to take these and apply them to himself. It's one of the ways, the subtle ways, that he claims to be God. And then starting in the 2nd book of Samuel and then picked up again in Isaiah and also Ezekiel, there's this prophecy that David, one of David's descendants, the son of David, is going to be this king that rules forever. Anyway, Jesus is that, and people call Jesus son of David, and Jesus is born in David's hometown, and anyway, so that's how it applies to David, to Jesus. Also, Jesus is one of David's descendants. Um, know the development of the covenant from Abraham to Moses to David to Jesus. So this is also in the beginning of the prophets handout. So the development of the covenant. So the first time you hear the word covenant is actually with Noah, but it's not really. That's just God saying, "Hey, I'm not going to kill the world like I did with the flood." It's not really a covenant with a specific people. The relationship that he starts with the nation of Israel starts with Abraham. That's the real beginning of the covenant, and he lays out his plan with his 3 promises. That he's going to give him many descendants. He's going to give them land, so they'll become a great nation. And the third one is that through this nation, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So he's laying out how he's going to the spiral of grace. So he's going to start with one person and then move to that person's to all their descendants, to a whole nation, and then to the whole world. And Jesus, of course, is the fulfillment of all that. So the next step in the covenant is with Moses. He's going to specify and give the people the law as their job to hold up. That's their job to. That's how they stay faithful to the covenant, is by being faithful to the law. Then with David, he's going to promise a king who's going to rule forever. That's the final phase, and then Jesus puts the final phase into motion by being that king and enacting the kingdom of God, which we're still in right now. We're supposed to be building that ourselves, but you'll learn about that next year. Yeah, so that's it. All right, so that's pretty much it for Unit 4-2. Reminder to know the 20 key events. You're going to have to write those out and not just list them, but actually tell the story of the people of Israel. So I would be able to, give a couple or 3 sentences about each event. So all this stuff is from previous units and in previous videos. Spiral of Sin, Spiral of Grace. Yep, we talked about that. We've talked about all that. Again, if you're looking to do the challenge essay, I really recommend looking at the beginning of the prophets one, and I would use these frameworks and maybe choose one especially to focus on, probably the Spiral of Grace or the Covenant, to really explain God's plan. What I'm looking for you to do is explain God's plan of saving the world and how that culminates in Jesus. So the 20 key events are kind of like your, having those memorized is kind of like your cheat sheet to remember how things go. But then I want you to use the covenant, the spiral of grace, as you go through to show how this is all leading to Jesus. Okay? But again, that's only for those of you that are doing the challenge essay. All right. Well, good luck on your exam. I will see you on Tuesday.